Namaskar, good evening. Once again, a very warm welcome to the 16th edition of Jaipur Literature Festival, protected by Dettol Banega Swasth India. First edition, The Return of Vikram and Betaal. Sunita Pant Bansal in conversation with Malashri Lal, and Namita will be launching the book. Justice Vikram is at the peak of his career, riding high on his success as though there is no tomorrow, a fact that comes true in his case when he is paid a visit by the Dut, the angel of death. Vikram's time on earth is over, but Dut offers him a deal. Vikram has to solve some complicated cases, and if Dut approves his verdict, he gets a fresh lease on life, till Dut gives him another one. If Vikram is unable to reach the right verdict, he has to leave with the Dut. The cases are based on actual criminal cases with unusual, often unpredictable verdicts, solving which Vikram revisits his relationships and unravels the knots that have bound him to life. What would be the final verdict on himself? Check out Justice Vikram and Dut in a new avatar of Vikram and Betaal. I welcome Sunita Pant Bansal, the writer of the book. She's a mythologist, a storyteller. She explores and reinterprets the timelessness of characters from epics and foundational texts in her stories, blending mythology and history with real life. She has authored 25 books for adults and young adults, decoding the philosophy of mythology, and hundreds of books for children. Malashri Lal is a writer and academic with 16 books to her credit, retired as professor, English Department, University of Delhi. Namita Gokhale is the author of 21 books, including 11 works of fiction. She's also the co-director of the Jaipur Literature Festival. She has been awarded the Sahitya Akademi Award for 2021, and she received the prestigious First Centenary National Award for Literature in 2017. She has recently honored with the Nilamarani Sahitya Sanman 2023. So over to for the book launch by Namita Gokhale, Sunita Pant Bansal, and Malashri Lal. Congratulations, Sunita. Now I would invite Namita Gokhale to say a few words.
Dear friends, it's really lovely to see a book come to life at the Jaipur Literature Festival. My friend Sunita Pant Bansal is an accomplished writer who's written, I can't tell you how many books. I mean, I know there are over 40. It's books for children, books for this, but this is her first full fiction book. And it's a riveting read. And she was talking about it here in Jaipur, and here it's alive for all of us. So it brings myth, philosophy, ethical questions, and the constant reinterpretation of myth, legend, and epic that happens in India, renewing all our old stories for new ones and fresh ones, and with the continuity that only our culture has. So thank you, and over to Mala and to Sunita. Thank you.
Good evening. It's great to see a full house, and I'm sure Vikram and Betaal are looking from somewhere there and waiting to hear what we are going to say about them. Sunita, thank you for this absolutely riveting book. And the full title is The Return of Vikram and Betaal. So when I started reading the novel, my first question that came to my mind, Sunita, is that why are we giving the story a modern cosmopolitan setting? Because what you've done is a novel about a young and smart lawyer, a very upmarket, very successful, loves his villa, loves his clothing, his branding, the club life, and all that kind of a thing. So this is the modern Vikram. And Betal, in your story, starts off by being a waiter, but he's a shapeshifter and sometimes he appears in other forms. And I love the name that you've given to the Betal. He's called Y full stop Doot, D-O-O-T. So obviously Yamdoot.
Yamdoot, yes.
All right. So why don't you tell us what made you reimagine this story as today's fable?
Well, thank you, Malak. Can you hear me? Yes. Yeah. So, why today's fable? Because how else do I explain what I wanted to explain if I hadn't put it in today's times, you know? That's why Vikram had to be today's Vikram and Doot had to be today's Doot. Now, Vikram, the story, the concept of the story is the age-old concept of justice, and which is very difficult to understand as to what is right and what is not right. Somebody's right and somebody else is wrong. So it was something which I wanted to explain through the age-old story, the legend, ancient legend of Vikram and Betaal. And the only way I could do it, I could think of doing it, is to bring it down to today's level, because people would understand the language, people would understand the situations, and they would understand the philosophy, hopefully, behind it. So that's the reason why I had to contemporize it.
That's a great way of putting it, Sunita, because in a way, Betal is that ghost that all of us carry on our shoulders. वो भूत सवार जिसको कहते हैं, तो वो भूत सवार तो होता ही है, सबके अपने अपने भूत होते हैं जो कि सवार पे चढ़ते रहते हैं. So what are you suggesting, that it's actually the way we look at life, that we live an external life of urban success, materiality, all the ambitions that we have about owning this and that and doing this and that with our lives. But actually that Bhoot Savar, that's the inner voice, is the resistant conscience. And that is what gives us the warning signals that, all is not well with this outer world of materiality, that there's something else that I'm looking for. So is your Vaidut / Betal this quiet inner voice which is fighting against the external norms of what is success?
Writing this, it wasn't so. The idea was not this. Yes, in a way, you can say Betal is the conscience, yes. But the idea was that I was working on Vikram and Betal, if you remember. So here the Betal had to bring riddles to Vikram for him to solve. And the riddles were criminal cases, real criminal cases, where Vikram has to give a verdict. So my Betal, what he does is he kind of acts as the alter ego at times, he at times provokes him, and at times he behaves like a reader would. So when you read a book, you have lots of questions. When you watch a film, you have lots of questions. So, at that time, Betal is the one who's asking your questions. So that, that makes Vikram think twice and explain the entire judgment that he's passing. So you need a person there, to question him, to ask him, why are you giving this judgment? Because the verdicts are bizarre. If you notice, the verdicts are bizarre. And, how do you explain why this verdict is so and not so? So that is the questioning aspect that Betal, brings in. Plus, you had to have some kind of a light element. Otherwise, the subject is very serious. They're real criminal cases, and it's very heavy, and there's a philosophy underlying. So you had to lighten the mood also. And that's why Doot is coming in different avatars, so to speak. A woman also, Because after all, Atma can enter anybody, na? So it's like that. Old, young, woman, man, it's like that.
So let me provide a little bit of a backstory to what Sunita just said about the modern version that she's putting before us. So in the original Betal Pachisi, you will remember, there are these 25 riddles that the ghost gives to Vikram. And if he can solve it, there is some kind of a reward, but generally it is a kind of a punishment. And Vikram tries over and over again to solve those. What Sunita has done is that she has had this young modern Vikram, the lawyer, look at old legal cases which have problematic decisions or problematic judgments. And 25 would have been somewhat difficult to put together. So what Sunita has done is she selected 10 judgments, 10 cases, and why Dooth presents that as the puzzle that he must read up these case histories, he must think about it, he must come up with his answer to whether this was the correct conclusion, correct judgment or not. Now, I actually looked up some of those stories. They're absolutely fascinating ones of lost identity, inheritance. Yeah. Invariably, people are fighting over some wealth. Somebody is dead and can't be found, and then shows up many years later and says, I'm the person who actually belonged to this family, therefore all this inheritance is mine. So all these stories, I was wondering, where did Sunita get these from? And lo and behold, if you go to Google and you type in any of the chapter headings that Sunita has given us, the whole case pops up. So Sunita, what was your process of research, and do you have a legal background? I don't know about that.
No, I do not have a legal background. I have tremendous interest in law, and I watch a lot of serials, LA Law, etc., kind of serials. So yes, but how I dug up the cases was that I have good lawyer friends, criminal lawyers, and they gave me, websites where you have legal archives. So I dug out the archives. From there, I dug out the cases. So in this book, the cases are real, the verdicts are real, but the rest is fiction. Because obviously, I don't know the people, I don't know the people who are involved in the crime, I don't know their families. So the entire thing is fiction, except that the case is real and the verdict is real. That's how you're able to find them also. Yeah.
Why don't you give us one of the cases in brief?
No, that I can just
mention some of them.
I can mention, like I'll tell you that you'll find the case where these two brothers, liquor barons, they shot each other dead. So that is one very famous case. People would instantly, I'm sure, recall. Then I can tell you that there is a love jihad case. People would instantly remember that they have read about it. Then there is a case on which there was a movie made with Aishwarya Rai. People would read the story and they would identify with it. There's another case where a movie with Akshay Kumar was made. People would read it and identify. So there are cases that are pretty identifiable, very much.
So why don't you read us the prologue, at least some part of the prologue, because that's going to explain what you were doing. Just maybe a paragraph or so. It's a brief session.
Let me see. But one thing I'd just like to add here, when I started writing this book, what I wanted to do was to rewrite the ancient legend in a way that people would understand the philosophy. Because what I found was when you, and my inspiration was John Platt's book on, 25 stories of Vikram Betaal, which was published way back in the 19th century. That was my inspiration. And when I read that, I found that the stories of Betaal Pachisi are very adult stories. They are not the Vikram Betaal stories that one has been fed through TV and other books. So that made me feel that maybe I should kind of, tell people the philosophy is something to do with, relationships. And the actual Betaal Pachisi talks about relationships going wrong and how certain things, certain things can be set right and certain crimes can happen. And, the genesis of those crimes, because nobody is born a criminal. So there's always a genesis as to why a crime has been committed, So I wanted to bring that out, and that is why I started writing. And as I started writing, I realized is turning into a real crime-based fiction. It's turning into a legal fiction. That was not the original intent. As I just wanted to clarify that. It's by sheer chance that it has become what it has become. Yeah, so let me read something from this.
Just to get a taste of the book, maybe the first paragraph of the prelude.
First paragraph, I was
Yeah.
thinking I'll probably read from the first chapter, maybe? No, oh, you want prelude?
Yeah, the first is very powerful.
Okay. Prelude, first paragraph. Vikram was sitting 10 feet away from a burning pyre. It was a late autumn evening. His face glowed with the heat and light of the pyre. His pastel-colored linen casuals were speckled randomly with soot as he sat staring at the charred body being ravished by the hungry tongues of fire. Around him, there were more than 20 pyres in different stages of getting burnt. This was the Manikarnika Ghat on the banks of Ganga at Varanasi.
So that, dear friends, is a kind of a taste of how the Vikram Betaal story can be brought into the modern context. Many of us have been to Banaras. We know about Manikarnika Ghat. And there is a kind of a otherworldly feeling when you're surrounded by that situation, where you see the passage from one condition of being into another. And as Sunita was saying, that she has a deep interest in philosophy. And the philosophy of the ancient scriptures and some of our important texts have been earlier also rendered into summaries, into retellings, into teaching pieces in a way. And perhaps the Vikram Betaal story therefore needed to be placed in Banaras Ghat in order to move forward to remind us of this transition. Would you agree that this Banaras Ghat is important to the way you've positioned it?
Yes, because Banaras, means when you reach Banaras and you're sitting at the ghat, it is death. But somehow, at that point, death is not, it's not mourned there. It's kind of something that happens. It's a very robotic. The whole system there, if you go to that ghat, is extremely robotic. Like the bodies come, they're placed on pyres, they're burnt, and the next one comes, and so on and so forth. And suddenly you kind of realize that all that mourning and all is not required. In fact, there the people who are there who are handling the pyres, they tell you not to cry. They say if you cry, then the soul will not be able to actually leave the body. So don't cry, don't stop the soul from leaving the body. They tell you not to cry. So it's a very interesting place to be. And also since Vikram is facing death, because in the original Vikram Betaal also, the story starts, the entire thing starts when Betaal is asking him a riddle, and and the punishment is that his head would shatter into 100,000 pieces, right? So it was death. Here also, the same premise is taken, where Betaal, via Dut, tells Vikram, Justice Vikram, that this is your last day. But, I can give you a lease of life if you solve this case for me. So that's how the whole thing flows. So he faces death. And what happens in a person's mind when they're faced with death is what takes the story forward. Yeah.
It is an important question as to how we address the matter of death while we're actually in the process of living. And though that's a very somber question, there is some kind of a charm in Betaal and Vikram and Betaal stories and other such traditional stories that you have written about, Sunita, that it makes you think about the continuities beyond death. For instance, I'm reminded of your last book, Sunita, and that was Gita in Everyday Life.
Yeah.
So now Gita again is a very dense, difficult text if you look at it one way. But the way Sunita Bansal has presented it, it's like a formula for what you can do during the day, because while we are alive, we have to keep going. And yet the greater and larger philosophy of transition, which the ancient scriptures are often teaching us about, that matter of transition from one mode of living to another state of being, and the passageway is through death. That is at the core of the stories, whether we look at the Panchatantra that you've written about, the Gita in everyday life, and now your new book.
Yeah.
So, as a mythologist and a storyteller, what is it that you are wanting to achieve through these modern tellings of ancient scriptures?
I'm not really trying to achieve anything, actually, you know. It's something I'm passionate about, and the more books I read and write, I realize everything is the same, you know. It's the same philosophy of Gita running through all the books that I've written so far. So when I'm writing a Ramayana for young adults, I describe the metaphors, you know, what Ramayana stands for. If I write a Mahabharata, I do the same. Because everything, all the stories are metaphors, aren't they, about life, as to how to live life. And all the stories like Panchatantra, for instance, you know, it talks about relationships, how to handle relationships. So all these things, you know, they're nuggets of wisdom hidden in all our ancient scriptures and ancient literature. I just want to simplify them and bring them to people so that they understand the value of these, you know, and how what we can learn from them. Because topics like death and all are extremely profound. But what Gita tells us is about detachment. It talks about mindfulness. It talks about, you know, the impermanence. So that is something which again comes through this book. Because the flow of Gita is right there in Vikram's head as he goes through solving cases, you know. His own life is a lot of baggage that he's carrying, a lot of knots in his heart, they get unraveled. And he kind of is at peace. So that's how it's working.
So, your interest in mythology and storytelling of this nature is to have modern readers, particularly younger readers, address this issue of transition, newness, change, the philosophy of living. And as you mentioned, we all have to deal with relationships. And one way or the other, this question of attachment, detachment,
Yes.
relationships, human behavior, this is what our legends are all about. So I really congratulate you
Thank
on
you
this
so much.
wonderful book. Is there any one pressing question that somebody wants to ask? Okay, we'll take that one question because we have very little time. Go ahead. Is there a mic near you or you can just shout? Yeah.
At any point, did you feel like changing the judgments that were given? Like you said, the judgment and the cases are verbatim. So, at any point did you feel like changing the judgment ever?
That's such a wonderful question. And yes, I did. And but I wouldn't like to say which one because there was, you know, and because I didn't want to. Obviously, I had to use the actual judgment, so I had to use it. But yes, there was one particular case where I felt that this is not on. It shouldn't be done like this. But well, you know, we had to be within the legal purview, so I had to be guided by the law of the land. So I had to follow that.
Time for one more question. Yeah, can you just shout out loud? Yeah. Okay. The mic is with you.
I just wanted to ask that all the cases that you have presented in the book, have you presented the facts as it is, or did you change any judgments or the rationale behind it? Because, you know, as a writer, you do have the power and privilege to rewrite history as it ought to be.
You see, these were, as I said before, all the cases are, the criminal cases are real. So that crime happened and the verdict is real, the judgment was given. But the rest is all fiction because obviously I didn't know the people. So that is where I took the liberty of creating the scenario leading up to that crime and, you know, and I've also given witnesses because how the judge is judging is through the witnesses accounts because, you know, everything has many sides and that is how a judge passes a judgment. So I've given 4 witnesses who are giving 4 different sides to the case and the judge has to go through that and understand. And I didn't change because I felt that, you know, I have to reach this verdict. How could I change anything in the middle, you know, because I have to bring it down to this verdict. So no, of course I fictionalized the people. I added a lot of color to it. All that fun element I've added, but I couldn't change the verdict.
Well, as you said, you've added a lot of color to it. I love the colors. And I would just urge everyone here to go and get a copy of the book, and you will be signing.
Yeah.
So, do you have any last word for the audience?
Well, I would say that this book, if you read it once, you'll probably get to see the cases and understand what happened and why the verdict was given as such. But if you read it again, then you will understand Vikram's story, the philosophy, and his way of living life. And that is actually, the second reading will give you that, hopefully.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Congratulations on the new book. And
Thank you,
thank you
thank
to a wonderful audience.
Thank you so much, everyone, for being here.
Thank you, Sunita Pant Bansal and Malashri Lal ji, and all the very best and congratulations to Sunita ji. Thank you.
There